To get started on this exercise, you should have downloaded the Caricature reference photos and have a look at the different ones that I'm giving to you. I tried to give you a good variety of male and female, also young and old, different kinds of people. In doing this exercise, this tends to work if you have a good straight-on face, but once you get used to the process and the tools and techniques that we're talking about, you can actually apply this to any kind of face and any kind of person. It also works really well with animals. If you do want to try this exercise for yourself, it is also helpful to have some sort of facial expression that's very expressive, smiling, or otherwise kind of goofy and silly. Now, for the purpose of this unit, you're going to be doing this exercise twice. So I want you to pick two different photographs. One of the photographs can be used for the purpose of the exercise, while the other one can be used for the purpose of the project itself. So for me, I'm going to go ahead and pull out these two different photographs, and I'm going to use one of them for the exercise and the other for my final project that I'll work through. To get started, let's go into Photoshop and let's create a new document. We'll go up to File, down to New. The size of our document needs to be measured in inches, and it's going to be a simple 10 by 10 area. We don't need any other artboards, and let's keep our resolution at 300 pixels per inch. Do make sure you're working in RGB color mode, and for now we can just keep our background color to be a solid white. We'll say OK to this. And this is the area that we're going to be working in. Now, for this part of the exercise, you really won't be needing any of your drawing tablets. So much of what we're going to be doing can be done just by using your mouse, trackpad, and your keyboard. Let's go up and locate our image. We'll go up to File, down to Place Embedded, and locate the folder that your picture is in. In my case, I'm going to be working through this guy for the exercise. We'll say Place. Now when you bring him in, we'll need to resize it, so let's click on the edges and drag him out until he fills up the frame nicely. It doesn't have to take it up the entire area, but we mainly want to focus on the head as being the part of the caricature that we're creating. Do make sure to leave a little bit of room around everything so that you can have some area to work in. So about here is pretty nice for this particular design. Now when you do bring in these photographs, pay close attention to your Layers panel. Whenever you place something, you're placing it and bringing it in as a smart object. Essentially, this means that a copy of this layer or this photograph has been saved elsewhere, and you can't really do too many edits to a smart object unless you go to the original image. So what we want to do is to rasterize this and turn it into a normal editable type layer. So with your caricature portrait selected, let's go up to Layer, down to Smart Objects, and at the very bottom of this sub menu, choose Rasterized. With that done, you can look at your Layers panel now and see that it's turned into a regular layer from here. Now with this done, I want to save a copy of this layer so that I can always go back to it as a reference. So before I do anything else, with the layer still selected, let's go up to Layer and choose Duplicate Layer. And it's going to ask you to give it a new name. Essentially, you can keep it exactly the same, but I'm just going to call this my Caricature Portrait Base Layer. And we'll say OK to that. With that done, I can go down to my Layers panel. I'm going to turn off visibility of this one, and I'm also going to lock it down so that I don't accidentally, turn it back on. Lock it down first, then turn off visibility, so I don't accidentally do something to this layer. This is the layer that we want to be able to work on. With this done, here comes the fun yet tricky part of this exercise. We need to take each part of this character's face and make a copy of it onto its own individual layer. Now, depending on the character that you chose, this may have more or less than what I'm doing in the example, but the main thing is the more options you have, the better the results for your final caricature that you're creating. Now the tool that I'm primarily going to be using is my lasso selection tool. This will allow me to quickly and easily select out the exact area that I want so that I can copy it and paste it into its own layer. Now with it selected, let me make you aware of a couple of the keyboard shortcuts that I'm commonly going to use. When you make a selection, if you go up to select, you can deselect your selection by doing Command D, and that will deselect what you have. Now if you accidentally do that and you need to reselect it, you can go up to select and reselect an area by doing Shift Command D. And so that way, if I deselect or you see it click off, that's the way I'm deselecting that area. Also, when working with the lasso tool, do make sure that you have normal new selection mode selected. And I like to turn up the feather for my selection. What feather is going to allow you to do, let me show you this. I'll select this area. Instead of having a hard-edged selection, so let's say I selected part of his hair and deleted away, you can see that area has a nice crisp edge to it. However, if I increase the feather before I make a selection to about 10 to 15 pixels, so somewhere in between there, now when I make a selection and deselect it away, it gives me a nice soft transition. And for this exercise, we want to be able to blend in each of the individual parts of the face. And so having this feather turned on does tend to help out a good bit. I'll undo that and Command D to deselect it. So here's how my workflow is going to go. I'm going to zoom in. Let's say I wanted a copy of his eye. Now when I select the eye, I don't just want to select a small portion of this. I actually want more of the eye than I think is necessary. This way I can always go in and erase away the parts I don't need, but if I select too little, it's going to be very difficult to add on more. So whenever I make a selection of the eye, I'm going to select way out over here and get the entire eye socket and even part of the nose. Now that I've made this selection, I can go up to Edit and Copy or Command C. And when I go to Edit and Paste, as long as you had that area selected, it's going to paste a copy of it directly on top or in the same place. If I was to move it over, you can see there it is. Or if I went to my Layers panel, you can see it's created a new layer for what I have. If I turn that off, there's the eye right there. So as long as you have it selected, it'll be in the same spot. I do recommend renaming your layer as you do this. So this will be my left eye. Next, let's do the right eye. Now when I do this, choose my lasso tool again. Do make sure that you reselect your character portrait base. If you try to select it from this layer, it's not going to select anything. Again, we'll go in, select more than is necessary. And if you need to add on to your selection, you can always hold down the Shift key and get just a little bit more by selecting that. Now that it's selected, we'll do Command C to copy it and Command V to paste it into place. Notice now it has its own individual layer and I need to rename it. We're going to repeat this process for all the different parts of the face. I've got hair, I've got a forehead, 2 eyebrows, 2 ears, his nose. If they have a beard or any kind of facial hair, different parts of the beard like the mustache, the goatee, and even the side part of the beard can be part of it. And of course his mouth needs to be a selection as well. All right, with this done, I'm going to pull out my layers panel so you can see all of the different layers that I have. Each one has its own individual part to it. If I was to turn off my original base portrait, it would look something like this. And I should be able to go in and turn on and off and relatively select each part of my character as well. For now, I'm actually going to do that. Let's turn off all the different parts of my character so that they're out of the way. Oop, eyes too. The final thing I need to do is to make a selection of my head to use as my base. So one more selection to be made. In this case, it's going to be the entire facial area. Do make sure you select a little bit more than is necessary. And it's okay to go outside the edge. Just don't choose way too much because that's just more you have to clean up. With that done, copy, paste right in front, and we'll turn it off. Okay, with this done, now it's going to start to get a little bit weird. I need to be able to remove all noticeable features of this face until I have essentially a blank mask area. From there, I can start to add back in all the different parts and change the size. Doing this and having a base layer like this is going to make it much easier to do blends and realistic tones within your overall facial structure without making it look too obvious or too difficult or too different. So I'm going to also name this my base layer. Now the tools that I like to use in order to do this are kind of a variety of different kinds of tools. If we go over to our tools panel, if you look underneath your selection tools, locate the spot healing, the healing brush, and the patch tool. All three of these tend to do the same thing, but some work a little bit better depending on the situation you're in. In my case, if I was to use the spot healing brush tool, this works like a regular healing brush, and so a regular brush, and so you can change the size and the hardness of the edge of it. I like to keep it a relatively large, depending on the area I'm working on, but also a very soft edge. So bring the hardness down to near 0. With this tool, I can go into certain areas and clean it up by clicking and dragging over, let's say, the crease on his forehead. And that's going to look at the pixels around the area and start to blend it in. Now the downside with this brush is sometimes you can see it doesn't always work. So if I needed to get rid of an area like getting rid of his eyebrows, if I was to click and drag over this, you can see it's still going to leave a few areas left there. So it may take you multiple clicks until finally the entire area is filled in. Let's see if it'll work well on this side. The advantage of using this is that it does go very quickly, and it also tends to pick up on tones pretty well as well. But in this case, you can see the tones simply aren't blending too well. So I'm going to try a different tool. The healing brush tool works exactly the same as the spot healing brush tool, but the advantage of this tool is that it gives you the option to pick which area that you want it to blend in with. In my case, I want it to pick up on the tones that are present along the cheek or along this top area. I like the cheek because there's no other lines or wrinkles on that area. It works the same as a brush, so again, make sure you've got a good soft but relatively large edge brush to work on. To select the area, hold down the Option key. Notice that the Option key turns into a little crosshair, and I'm just going to click once right about here. When I let go, now I've got that area selected. You can see it's following my cursor, and I can click and drag and paint around and fill in all of that area. Now when I let go, you can see how it quickly blends it in. I did mess up just a little bit on this area, so let's go back and reselect. Hold down Option. Maybe this time I'll select something that's a little bit closer in to that area. Hold down Option, one click, and when I let go of my Option or Alt key, I can add in that part too. So it takes a little bit of work, but holding down Option, selecting areas, and painting it out until it gives you some relatively good looking results. Let's do the same now for the eyes. For the eyes, I'm going to use another tool called the Patch tool. The Patch tool works the same, but it also works like a selection tool. In this case, I'm going to carefully select around just the eye area. In this case, I don't want to select too much. I actually want to keep some of the shadows and highlights that are around it. But selecting the eye, this will allow me to drag my selection into a different area and choose where I want it to blend in. In this case, maybe the forehead is a good area to do. When I let go, you can see that it automatically fills it into that area. Now, one of the options that you want to make sure you have selected is either the source or the destination. If you have source selected, when you click and drag, it will paint out the source that you've selected. However, if you had destination selected, if you click and drag, it's going to make a copy of it, and it's going to blend that copy wherever you placed it, and that can get you in trouble as well. So in our case, I'm going to keep this set to source, and then again, click and drag till you get a nice smooth area. I don't want to get any of the wrinkles, I just kind of want these tones placed within there. Sometimes it may take multiple little selections, but eventually it will blend itself out. Let's do the same for the right eye. Again, click and drag. This time I'm staying a little bit closer to the eye area. With that selected, click and drag over and get rid of the eyes. Whew, now he's starting to look really, really scary. Next, let's do the nose. Again, I want to keep some of the major shadows that are here. So I'm going to select the bottom portion of this nose. And we'll get rid of just this part. Click and drag and let it crop out from there. Finally, let's do his mouth. Now in my case, I do want to keep his beard, but you can play around. It's going to be very difficult to get rid of the beard. So if yours does have a beard structure on the face, I would in general keep it. And then click and drag until it gives you kind of a nice open area to work from. It doesn't have to look 100% perfect, but this is a good starting point for the area that I want. And this is what I mean by a blank face. A face that's kind of devoid and gives us a good starting point to place each of our different features back into. But it also gives us the ability to make edits and changes as needed. Now let's go in and do a liquefied warping of this base face. Do make sure that layer is selected, and we'll go up to Filter and choose the Liquify filter. This is going to open up kind of like a mini program within Photoshop. Notice with Liquify, you've got a set of tools off to the side, and each tool kind of does something different. In general, I don't use all of these tools. Instead, I like to use the warping tool, the forward warp, and also there's a pucker and a bloat. When you select the warp tool, you have a kind of a large brush in my case, and you can change the brush size off to this side. So maybe I want my brush to be a little bit smaller and a little bit more manageable. You can also change out and play around with the pressure and the density. In general, I like to keep my pressure a little bit low. Go away, Brian. A little bit lower than 100%. This way I can easily make changes. But with this warp tool, this allows me to click and drag and push in on different parts of my face, and you can see how it will liquefy it. Now you can get some bad results very, very quickly. This is why I like to keep my pressure relatively low and make subtle changes, very slowly clicking and dragging the parts that I need. Also changing the size of your brush, maybe a little bit larger. Whoops, let's do a little bit smaller than that. Tends to make it easier. The key to success for this project is to make your changes very subtle but slightly noticeable. You don't want to do anything overly dramatic, else it will look a little bit too way off. So for instance, if I wanted to have the forehead be much larger, I'm going to change the size of my brush to be about 1,000 pixels. I can click and drag up, and you can see how all of the parts of the face start to move in. Now I'm paying attention to his brow. Maybe I don't want the brow to move as much, but we can click and drag up and out until it gives us a different kind of rounded structure. Let's do the same for his chin. Maybe I want his chin to go down, and we'll push in on his cheeks just a little bit more for here. Again, if I do it too much, it's going to look way too warped. That may be something that you want, but for mine, maybe I'll keep it like this. Some other things you can do are pucker and bloat. Now pucker, as the name would suggest, it's going to take the area of pixels and it's going to bring it in. So if I needed to make an area smaller, let's say I needed to make the eyes a little bit smaller. Again, adjust the size of your brush and change mine to reach the size of just about the size of the eye. And I can click and drag and I can bring in that area. Right now it's not too noticeable. We'll do this again to different parts of the face. But doing that will stretch it in. Bloat will do the opposite. If you need an area to be larger, so select bloat, change the size of your brush. Let's say I wanted the cheeks to be larger. Click and drag on that area to pull those parts out. So once you get the base of your design warped the way you like it, maybe I'll bring this lower part of his chin in just a bit from here. Once you get the area that you like, you can say OK, and that will lock in your transformation. Now, if you think you've gone too far and you need to undo it, simply hit Cancel and go back up to Liquify. I'm going to say OK, and this will give us our new starting point that we have. Now we can go in one part at a time and start to re-add back in each part of his face. I like to start off with the eyes. So I'm going to go to my Layers panel. Let's turn on visibility for my left eye. Here it is as its original position, and we need to go in and make some edits and transformations to it to fit back into the size of the face. With it selected, I've got my selection and move tool turned on. I like to turn on auto select and show my transform controls. This will give me my little bounding box around the area, and that will allow me to quickly and easily scale things in and place it where I want it to be. You can see because we had a feathered edge, the transition and the blending of this goes over very, very smoothly. Just remember, once you make a transformation and finish the position that you want, make sure to hit the return or the little checkbox at the very top to lock it in. So playing around with the different parts of this is going to be part of the fun in creating your caricature. You can make certain body parts larger or smaller. So in this case, I've made one eye small, and I can make another eye maybe super large or much, much larger. Let's say maybe I kind of like the smaller eyes. So I'll scale this in and place this right where it needs to go for it right here, kind of using the other one as a starting sizing point. Now at any time, if I see that there's part of it that doesn't transition very well, or I could smooth this out, this is where I can go into my layer, grab your eraser tool. The eraser tool works just like a brush, so make sure you've got a nice soft edge. So I'm going to bring the hardness all the way down, and I can go in along these edges and clean it up. So if I wanted that to transition a little bit more, I can erase that away, and now you can see that the shadows look a little bit more natural for this one. Let's do the same thing for the left eye. On this left eye, I can see kind of a hard edge right here. So maybe I'll erase that away and clean up that transition till it gives me something that I like. Again, it doesn't have to look 100% perfect at this stage. Later on, we can always go back in and change it up. With the eyes done, let's do the eyebrows. I'll turn on the left eyebrow. With this eyebrow, I can do a rotation of it by clicking on the edge and drag it around. Let's do it a little bit larger. Again, make the transformation for this. Let's turn on the right eyebrow and do the same thing. Click and drag, rotate around. Till it comes into position where I like it. Once I like that, hit return and lock that in. Once it's placed, now I can go in with my eraser tool and clean up the look of it. In this case, my right eyebrow, I can see kind of a darker spot here. So this is where I'll grab my eraser, then go in with it and slowly erase it away till it blends in a little bit more. Another thing you can do with your eraser is play around with the opacity of it. Dropping that opacity will make it transition a little bit better. It'll take a few more clicks, but it'll give you a much softer transition that you're trying to create. Let's do the same for the left eyebrow. Do make sure you have the correct layer selected as well whenever you do these kinds of transformations, and erasings. With the nose, let's do something special. I can turn on the layer for the nose. Now with this one, of course, I can make the nose much larger. Now when I do this, you can see that the nose layer is underneath all of the eyes and the eyebrows that I have, and I want to be able to see it a little bit better. So for this one, maybe I'll click on the layer itself and drag it up and above each of the eyes until it's on top of there. Now that I've got the nose much larger, that works out and it shows up much better, albeit I need to erase away different parts of it as well. The other thing I can do with the layer selected, I can also liquify it. We'll go up to Filter. Now when you choose Liquify this time, don't choose the first Liquify. This will only reapply the same transition. We want to go down to the original Liquify. And it'll open up and it'll give me my nose transition with this one. Now to do the transition, maybe you want to be able to see the face behind it as well. And so this tends to come in handy. To do that, go over to your options and select Show Backdrop. This will allow you to choose different layers or different parts of your image, and it'll give you a background to be able to work on. In my case, maybe I want to let the bottom of the nose be a little bit larger. So I'm going to choose Bloat. And with Bloat selected, I can click on the nose, and very gradually it gets larger and bigger and bigger. Also with that, I can choose my Warp tool. Let's push it up and in. Now sometimes this does, the background does kind of get in the way, so take it, use it sparingly, but use it as a good starting point for your design. Once you've got that, I can say OK to my transformation, and this will give me my new transformation to work in. With that selected, let's choose our eraser tool, and let's clean up the edges so I can see the eyebrows and have a little bit better transition around the eyes. And also maybe even down here around the mouth. Next, let's do the mouth. Turning on the mouth layer. One of the warps that I want to do for this one is maybe give him a little bit bigger of a smile. So in addition to making his smile larger, I'm also going to go up to Edit, down to Transform, and I'm going to do a warp for this one. With the warp, it gives you kind of this little mesh on top of it. I can click on the inside of it, and I can move it around. I can also click on the edges and bend those till I get a position that I like as well. So in this case, I want it to kind of match up a little bit better. Maybe bring in the sides of his cheeks and bring down this area. You can see how this blends really well with his beard that he has. With that done, we'll lock in that transformation by clicking the little checkbox at the top, and it gives me that kind of effect with this. I'm liking that. Let's see if I can go in with my eraser tool now and clean up any edges, especially along this edge, I think are a little bit too harsh. The next layer I have is my forehead layer. I'll turn that on. Let's back out. Now with my forehead, I'm going to click and drag this up above everything so I can see it. There really isn't much change or difference that I have. I actually like the forehead that had a transformation. So maybe for this layer, I don't even need it at all. I'm going to keep it turned off just so that I can have it if I do need it later. But for my forehead, I don't need to do any transformation. So feel free to not use some layers if they're not necessary. Next one is my left and right ear. So with those turned on, let's make this ear a little bit larger. It's an easy transformation. But also I'm looking at the hairline and where it would fall along this area. So maybe I'll get it to transition right about there. Let's do the same for the right ear, making it match up. along that face. Now I can go back in with my eraser tool and erase away any parts that I think need better transitions. Finally, let's do the hair. Turning the hair back on. Of course, with this one, I definitely want to make sure it's on top of all the important parts, and want to make sure it fits my new scalp. So I'm going to make it a little bit larger. Since we mostly worked on the forehead's what needs to be warped out just a little bit. So with this layer selected, I'm going to go into my filter, down to Liquify. And again, I'm going to turn on my backdrop so I can see the area that I'm working on. And very carefully, I'm going to push out the layer. Now in this case, when I do that, it is going to be difficult to see the change. So maybe I'll turn my backdrop off by just a bit. The main thing is I want to be able to see where his hair is. Push it up, be a little bit frizzier, maybe a little bit larger. Bring in where the ears are so that it transitions. Now in my case, I have 2 sets of ears now, so I need to change that out. We'll say OK to that. Now his hair matches a little bit more of the flow of the overall design. And it also matches the background of it. And then finally, I also have the chin layer. Now with the chin layer, just like with the forehead, it doesn't necessarily need to be changed or used. I kind of like the new chin that I have. But if necessary, I can select it. I could have made it a little bit larger or smaller or done any kind of transformation that I wanted to with this one. But I actually like the little warp that I've done. So I'm going to turn my chin layer off. I'll keep it on there, but I just won't use it for here. With that done, now we've got our base aligned with all of the new features set for our face that we've created. The last thing we want to do is to go in and see if we need to clean up, move around, and erase away any parts that are not necessary. So as I'm looking at this, maybe some things I could clean up could be along the neck area. Do I see any parts of the ear or the hair that are sticking out that don't need to be there? Actually, everything for mine looks good. If you see something on yours that you need to change or correct, do make sure you have the correct layers selected. So in my case, let's make this eye just a little bit bigger. Because I had auto select turned on with my selection and move tool, it automatically jumps to that layer. And now from here, I can make that eye a little bit bigger. Maybe even I'll rotate it. Give this a little bit more rotation. Any part of your caricature's design is fair game. So you can make eyes larger, you can rotate things, you can make parts smaller, any kind of exaggeration that you want to give to your character's design. Once it's finished, let's put all of our new character inside of its own folder. So I'm going to select all the layers by clicking on our base layer, holding down Shift, all the way up to the topmost layer, put it into a group folder, and we'll call this our caricature base. Not our caricature base, our caricature, we'll just call it our new caricature. From here, now let's see if we can add back to his original body. I can turn on the body layer. You can see how it would fit within that area, but I can also see, certain parts that are also not working out as well. So let's go in and see if we can fix this part of the neck and clean up the overall design. In order to do this, with the entire folder selected, notice I've got a bounding box around it. We'll go up to Edit and down to Transform. Let's scale up the size of our head so that it's a little bit larger and also covers the majority part of the neck. And if you want to, maybe I'll give it a little bit of a turn to the side of it as well. We can go up to Edit and rotate it, Transform, do a rotation. That'll place it a little bit better for there. Hit Return to lock in that. Now I can go in with my eraser tool and erase away any other anomalies. In that case, make sure you've got the right layer selected. If I turn off my base, you can see it's the base layer that's on. With the base, I can go in with my eraser tool and erase away that part until it matches up nicely. It takes a little bit of work and finessing, but eventually you will get some results that will blend well with your overall design. If push comes to shove, you can always make a new layer on top and try to paint in what you need. But in this case, we want to just keep it our regular photographic reference. With that done, now we've got more of a clownish kind of feature for our caricature. So here was the original, and here was the new one that we created. I see one more little spot underneath his chin. Let me fix that one. Going back to my base, we want to make sure to see the entire clothing that's underneath him to make it look nice and believable with this. So remember, for this exercise, you're going to be doing one of these for an exercise grade, and then you're going to be doing another one that's not this one as your project grade. Once you finish with this entire caricature, save it up as a Photoshop file. So we'll go to File and Save. Do make sure to add your name to it. So this will be Ivy Photo Caricature. Make sure Photoshop is set to the format so I can see all of your layers, and upload this to Moodle or email it to me for your exercise grade.